think it's a tragedy. I think it's an incredible tragedy. It's also a tragedy for a tax base. And the governors know exactly what I'm talking, and I'd like to hear anybody talk about that. But if you're the governor of a state and you lost thousands of very rich people that were paying a lot of taxes and weren't happy about it, and weren't happy about what's happened to California, which has all the advantages of greatness, but they've had horrible politicians.
Gavin Newsom's name is nearly inseparable from California politics. And whether you love him or hate him, there's no denying his impact. Once hailed as a progressive leader who would transform the state, he now finds himself at the center of a growing wave of discontent. His ambitious promises of solving homelessness, fixing the housing crisis, addressing economic inequality, and ensuring public safety have largely gone unfulfilled. Meanwhile, critics argue that his focus has shifted from governing California to elevating his own national profile, making frequent appearances in other states, debating Republican governors, and positioning himself as a Democratic heavyweight. In this video, we'll break down why so many residents of the Golden State are fed up with Gavin Newsom. Newsom's approval ratings have collapsed.
Gavin Newsom deserves to be annihilated. I want to be give me a minute to just calmly talk about what the reality is in California, where regardless of what anyone says, what you will hear in California among both Democratic voters and Democratic politicians is that all of the issues that we're having today date back to Ronald Reagan. That argument is insane.
Gavin Newsom began his governorship with strong support, buoyed by California's progressive voter base and his ambitious reform agenda. However, over time, his approval ratings have taken a dramatic dive, signaling widespread dissatisfaction. In 2020, Newsom enjoyed a robust 64% approval rating. By late 2023, that number had plummeted to just 44%, with nearly half of voters outright disapproving of his leadership. A UC Berkeley Institute of Governmental Studies poll, co-sponsored by the LA Times, found that Californians are particularly frustrated with his increased involvement in national politics. While Newsom has spent considerable time traveling to red states, funding political ads against Republican governors, and engaging in high-profile debates, many voters feel he has abandoned his responsibilities at home. More than 43% of those surveyed disapproved of his focus on national ambitions, preferring that he concentrate on solving the problems plaguing California. The dissatisfaction extends beyond just Republicans and independents. Even among Democrats, his support has waned. Several left-leaning groups, including labor unions and progressive activists, have criticized his handling of key policy issues, particularly his vetoes of bills that would have expanded worker protections. Some advocates accuse him of betraying progressive values in an effort to appeal to moderate voters on a national scale. The decline is also being driven by public frustration over his handling of major crises, from the worsening homelessness epidemic to rising crime rates and California's growing budget deficit. The housing crisis.
It's no surprise the cost of living gets higher and higher every day. The Californian American dream is argued to be slipping away through lack of real estate available and harsh bidding wars.
We're expecting the median price in Bakersfield to be $395,000.
When Newsom first ran for governor, he made bold promises to fix California's housing crisis. He pledged to oversee the construction of 3.5 million new housing units by 2025, arguing that increasing the housing supply would drive down costs and make home ownership more accessible. But as of early 2025, the promise remains far from reality. Not only has California failed to meet this goal, but the housing crisis has worsened. The state remains near the bottom of national rankings for housing affordability. The median home price now sits above $750,000, more than double the national average, pricing out many middle-class families. Meanwhile, rental costs have continued to skyrocket, leaving millions of Californians struggling to make ends meet. One of the bigger obstacles has been restrictive zoning laws, which make it difficult to build new housing developments. Although Senate Bill 50, a bill designed to override local restrictions and encourage high-density housing near public transit, was introduced, it failed to pass twice. Newsom, despite his initial support for housing reform, did little to push the bill forward. The slow pace of construction, combined with an increasing demand for housing, has only exacerbated the situation. Many residents, unable to afford to live in the state, have been forced to move to Texas, Arizona, or Nevada in search of cheaper housing. Homelessness.
This scene is a regular occurrence. City officials cleaning encampments. Unhoused Americans moving street to street. Like Anthony, who says he's been living in a tent for the past 3 years.
Perhaps the most glaring failure of Newsom's tenure has been his inability to address California's homelessness crisis. The state now accounts for nearly 1/3 of the entire homeless population in the U.S., and the numbers continue to rise. Despite allocating over $17 billion in taxpayer funds to combat homelessness, the situation has only deteriorated. Cities like Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Sacramento are overrun with tent encampments. Sidewalks, parks, and public spaces have become home to thousands of people who lack access to shelter, healthcare, and basic sanitation. Many businesses have shut down or relocated due to the surge in crime and drug use in areas where homeless encampments have taken root. Newsom's approach has largely been to throw money at the problem without addressing its root causes. His administration has invested in housing projects and mental health programs, but critics argue that these efforts have failed due to bureaucratic inefficiencies and poor execution. The lack of accountability has led many to question whether the billions allocated to homelessness programs are being spent effectively. One of Newsom's recent initiatives, the CARE Court program, aims to force people with severe mental illnesses into treatment. While the plan has been praised by some, it's also been met with skepticism. Many experts argue that without a significant increase in affordable housing options, mental health treatment alone will not be enough to curb the crisis. California's economy.
Happening, California leaders are preparing for a possible economic downturn.
State revenues are billions below what was projected for this time of year, and the governor is now more cautious about new spending.
Despite the claims that California is an economic powerhouse, the state is facing one of its worst financial crises in recent history. The budget deficit has ballooned to at least $38 billion, with some estimates placing it closer to $68 billion, raising concerns about the state's fiscal future. The state's reliance on high-income earners to fund its budget has proven to be a double-edged sword. During economic booms, California enjoys a surplus, but when the economy slows, tax revenues plummet, leading to massive shortfalls. Newsom's response has been to propose spending cuts, but many residents fear that essential programs will suffer as a result. Meanwhile, businesses are leaving California in droves. High taxes, excessive regulations, and an unfriendly business climate have driven companies like Tesla, Oracle, and Hewlett-Packard to relocate to states like Texas and Florida. Some businesses have been hit particularly hard, with many shutting down due to rising costs and burdensome regulations. For working-class Californians, the economic outlook is bleak. Inflation and high living costs have made it increasingly difficult to afford basic necessities, and wages have not kept pace with rising expenses. Crime and public safety.
The most brazen of crimes breaking out across the Golden State.
Smash and grabs, luxury store shakedowns, the pillaging of department stores.
California has seen a dramatic rise in crime in recent years, further contributing to Newsom's declining approval ratings. Cities across the state have experienced increases in violent crime, theft, and drug-related offenses. Many businesses have been forced to close due to rampant shoplifting and looting. Newsom has faced criticism for his support of criminal justice reforms that have led to reduced penalties for certain offenses. Laws like Proposition 47, which lowered penalties for shoplifting and drug possession, have been blamed for the surge in theft and drug-related crime. And law enforcement agencies across the state have struggled with staffing shortages, making it difficult to combat rising crime rates. Education system in crisis.
Did you see that story in California, by the way, about how they're going to try and reteach math? Did you see this one from the New York Times?
What?
Yeah, it's solid.
Reteach math?
So they're going to figure out how to teach math differently. They said that they don't want to have, they're getting rid of some of the objective standards with regard to math, because math is, and they want to get rid of the idea that there are naturally gifted children. They said they're not allowed to say that they're naturally gifted children anymore.
Isn't that the case with New York as well? Didn't they get rid of
they're trying to get rid of the magnet schools over there too.
But gifted programs, right?
Yes, the gifted programs, because there's too many Asian kids.
One of the most significant failures of Gavin Newsom's tenure is the state of California's public education system. Despite boasting the largest education budget in the country, California's schools still continue to rank near the bottom in national performance metrics. Many parents and educators argue that years of mismanagement, bureaucratic inefficiency, and politically motivated policies have contributed to the decline. Standard test scores show troubling trends, with California students lagging behind much of the nation in math, reading, and science proficiency. A 2023 report from the National Assessment of Educational Progress found that only 30% of California's fourth graders were proficient in reading, and math scores were similarly dismal. Many Californians, including lifelong Democrats, have voiced frustration over the state's declining educational standards, with families increasingly looking for alternatives like charter schools, homeschooling, and moving to states with stronger education systems. The state's failure to improve public schooling has only fueled the broader exodus from California. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you think California is on the decline under Gavin Newsom, or are these issues being exaggerated? Let us know in the comments section below.